Things are gonna get crazy!
Most everyone's mad here.
Time once again to get crazy onto AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. Yes, welcome one and all to another fun-filled and exciting episode of course, what I've already mentioned, AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. Now, just a little heads up though, that we are going to experience a little bit of a shorter episode than usual since we didn't necessarily have a whole bunch of animation news going on or even a bunch of movie news happening. So don't expect this to be too long or anything like that, unless I really do have a whole lot to say on the stories that are going to be coming up. That could be possible as well, but just want to give you guys a little bit of a notice that this will be just 4 stories that we are going to be discussing instead of the usual 5. However, there is also another thing that I want to go and discuss, and I seriously want to go and bring up before we actually do get this started on this episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, because there is something that is happening right now currently in this world that is a massive disaster, and as you could probably tell, not many people are really discussing about it, so I might as well give it some attention here. And of course, I'm talking about the Amazon rainforest. Considering that it is one of the most important forests in our planet, and that it does supply 20% of the oxygen on this earth, it is a very important ecosystem and one of the most important natural places on Earth. However, for weeks right now, there have been fires that are destroying it. There have been a lot of fires that are really screwing over the Amazon, and it's almost to the point where there is a massive deforestation that you can even see it from space. Like, if you just look at the Earth, like just how it is, like a big circle, like you will see the little spot where the fire is really emerging and it's really giving out some catastrophic results. And what's even worse is that we know that the Brazilian government is not doing anything about it, especially with their far-right president, who has pretty much confirmed that he really is the cancer of Brazil. And considering how he is pretty much doing nothing about the Amazon other than to just blame it on the left, just like what any far-right person would do, like do nothing about the situation, pin the blame on their political opponents, and that's it. They think like they could just walk away with just that. I think it really goes to show that the far-right president of Brazil really is the lung cancer of Brazil. So with that said, I want to go and start things off by bringing up awareness about what's happening with the Amazon rainforest. Now, I know that there might be some people that could be curious as to say, okay, you are bringing awareness, but what about if you want to take action? What can you do to go and help? Well, if you do a little bit of research, there are plenty of ways that you can go and help, and you can actually go and donate. This is just one of many examples that you can actually go and find. I have this website right here. It's Amazon Watch. It is amazonwatch.org, and you can go and donate whatever amount you want. I think the minimum is $25, and it will go and help out. It says... Well, I think it even says right here, just reading from my source, from Amazon Watch, as it says, the immediate crisis of catastrophic fires in the Amazon are an urgent threat to its indigenous inhabitants, the forest itself, and our global climate. Your donation will go directly to our work with indigenous communities to stop the destruction and defend their rights and homes. So it isn't just about the forest factor and also the ecosystem, but also this is for the indigenous people that live in the Amazon, and also for the sake of the animals that live there. So there is so much at stake. So before I do get things started in AniMat's Crazy Cartoons Cast, I feel like it is very important to go and bring this up. And if you can, please please go and donate to charities and donation places that really do help out, specifically on the Amazon, so that we can go and actually help out. Unlike the far right, we have a responsibility as mentally functioning human beings to go and help out our planet and to go and help out the Amazon for a better ecosystem, for a better environment, and hopefully just a better place that we can breathe easily and just to help out with nature, to go and help out with that before this can have some catastrophic results onto climate change as well. So I need to go and address this, and I feel like this is a very important issue that we have to begin. So with all that said and done, now that I have addressed that, and hopefully you guys will go out and you can help out on the Amazon by giving out donations and stuff like that, I think it is time we could go and get things started. But before we do, I would like to go and ask the chat wall, guys, are you all ready for this episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast? Let me hear it, guys. Are you all ready for this? Can we go and start off the actual episode itself? Let me hear it, guys. Are you ready? Yes? Okay, good. Oh, it looks like people are ready. Now people are set to go and start this off. So let's go and begin this episode. And the first thing that we are going to go and talk about is easily the biggest news that is happening in entertainment this week. Like covering everything, like animation, movies, TV shows, and what have you. Like this is pretty much the biggest thing that people are talking about, and they're still talking about it to this day. And on top of that, I wouldn't be surprised if we are going to be talking about this in the following weeks, because this is definitely a story that is long in development, and I'm sure a lot of people will even consider this one of the biggest movie news that is happening, that's happened this year in general. And what I'm talking about, of course, is going to be the Spider-Man deal. Yes, the infamous deal between Disney and Sony has pretty much fallen apart regarding the rights of Spider-Man. So in case you guys don't necessarily know, currently with the position of Spider-Man, even though the film rights belong to Sony Pictures, for a few years now, Disney and Marvel has been collaborating with Sony Pictures in order to have Spider-Man come into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That is why you would see not only Spider-Man movies be a part of the MCU, movies like Homecoming and Far From Home, but on top of that, you would also see Spider-Man appear in movies like Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and just recently with Avengers Endgame. But this seems to be a bit of a shock that this has been happening right now, especially since a few days ago, Spider-Man Far From Home, the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and the latest Spider-Man movie, that has actually broken the record of not only the highest grossing Spider-Man film of all time, but also the highest grossing movie ever distributed by Sony Pictures. It has officially surpassed Skyfall in order to go and achieve that record. And then suddenly, this happened. Somehow, now the deal just broke into pieces, and now Disney is no longer collaborating with Sony. So the big question is, what happened? What the fridge happened that just a few days after such a monumental moment for both Sony Pictures and Spider-Man, that suddenly the deal just got torn into pieces, just pretty much got broken? What happened? Well, essentially what happened was that not long ago, Disney decided to go and bring up a new offer to Sony Pictures regarding the deal with Spider-Man. Disney came in and they offered a full-on 50-50 deal, where Disney and Sony would go and put in 50% of the budget in order to create these Spider-Man movies, or at least these Spider-Man solo movies, and then they would go and split the profits 50-50, where whatever revenue that they would make on the film, Disney would have 50% and Sony Pictures would have 50%. But on top of that, also in this deal, Disney and Marvel wanted to go and also chip in a little bit to lend a helping hand onto the process of making some of the spin-off films. You know, the cinematic universe Sony wants to develop that started with Venom, where it would star a lot of the Spider-Man villains, you know, like Venom, Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, and all those guys. And also, of course, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. They want to go and lend a helping hand if they can go and assist on making those movies, for the potential that maybe we could see those characters appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, maybe have the potential of having characters like I almost said Tom Holland, but Tom Hardy's Venom appear in the MCU somewhere. So that was the deal that Disney wanted to make. But Sony immediately came in and just said, no, they do not want that. And they wanted to stick with the current deal that they have right now. And the deal that's currently on set, or the deal that's been going on for years that Disney and Sony had been doing, is that Disney would fund 100% of the Spider-Man movies. They would also do most, if not the entire creative process. Like, Disney would be in charge entirely of making all the solo Spider-Man movies, and Sony would only be responsible for the marketing and also for the distribution. And from there, Sony would have the grand majority of the profits that are made from the Spider-Man solo films. And as for Disney, all they would get is just a 5% share of the first dollar earned, meaning that they only get 5% of the box office total that the Spider-Man solo films would accumulate either on the first day or on the first weekend, and that's pretty much it. Now, of course, they also get a few things as well. Disney would also have Spider-Man appear in some of the other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies that are not from Sony. That's why you see him in like Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, along with having merchandising, of course. Like, Disney would have all the profits for the merchandise. Sony wanted to keep the deal as is and not really change. And from there, ever since the news broke out, we have heard a lot of different accusations that Sony wanted to make different counter offers. Disney tried to make things fair with all the situation. A lot of fingers have been pointing out, but ultimately, in the end, now there is just a full-on split. There is a full-on divorce between Disney and Sony, and now Sony is just walking away with the entire film rights to Spider-Man and leaving Disney with nothing. And even right now, there is currently a bit of a tug-of-war happening where Disney and Marvel are debating on who's going to have John Watts, the director of these MCU Spider-Man films, and who's going to, or at the very least, if not all of them, the director of the recent one, Far From Home, and trying to go and debate who's going to be the one who will attain the rights to that. And that's currently the position that we are in right now. And it is honestly very interesting to see how this story has been developing with so many different updates and so many different press releases regarding Disney's side and also Sony's side. But what is even more fascinating than any of that would have to be the audience's reaction, the public reaction, and how people have been watching this and how they've been speaking out on social media. It's pretty much all over the place, and I think it is safe to say that the internet pretty much exploded when the news broke out and everyone was flipping their minds, not to mention all the different accusations on who is responsible, because a lot of people are on so many different sides on the situation. Some say it's Sony's fault, some say it's Disney's fault, and there are, of course, people who would go and blame both. Now, I decided to go and make a little interesting experiment. I wanted to go on social media, and I asked people, if you would go and blame one company on this Spider-Man split, who would it be? Would you blame Disney, or would you blame Sony? Now, of course, there are people that did reply and say that they would blame both in the scenario, and they might have been a little bit upset of the fact that I didn't give out that option. But for the people who did vote, I will go and start things off on Twitter. Almost 450 people voted. In fact, 448 people voted on my poll. And I asked the question, now that Spider-Man's movie future might take an unexpected turn, who would you say is to blame for the possible doom of the deal? Is it Disney's fault or Sony's fault? And out of 448 people, 67% of them say that it is Sony's fault, while only 33% say that it is Disney's fault. So on Twitter, literally 2 out of every 3 people would say that it is Sony to blame. And then, of course, like, you look down, you see the comments, and a lot of people, like, just want to write down, it's both. And there are even a few people that use the gif of Tulio and Miguel from The Road to El Dorado to say both. Both is good. Oh my god, I love that movie so much. And I'm really happy, that's honestly a great response that people have, just to say, like, if they want to blame both, they use Tulio and Miguel in this case. But, but if there is one option, as you can see, 2 out of every 3 people would say that it is Sony. I asked the same question on Facebook, and it gathered less people than on Twitter, of course. Only 200 people that voted, but the results are a little bit the same. Where in here, I asked the same question, and out of 204 people that voted, 76% of them say that it is Sony's fault, and only 24% say that it is Disney's fault. Which, again, there are people who would also go and comment and say that, oh, it's both in this case. But the fine line to say about all this, like, I think the biggest thing to highlight with these polls is that in terms of the public reaction, the majority of them would say that it is Sony's fault. There are some that would blame Disney, and of course you got people that would say both. But in terms of the public consensus in this scenario, they would mostly blame Sony in this case. Now, what is interesting about all this? What is interesting about the deal and why people would blame one side or the other? It's mostly regarding as to why. Why is it that people would blame one side, or why would people blame another? Or why is it that, what's the goal for either of them? Like, why is it that this deal never went through in the first place? Like, what's wrong with them? Now, I decided to look closely, and I've analyzed, like, several articles in this scenario, and I tried to see what the situation is. And looking into Disney's side and looking into Sony's side. So let's go and start things off by looking into what Disney wanted out of all this. So the reason why they came in and decided to pitch in a whole 50-50 deal in this scenario. And from what I've gathered, it's mainly because Disney wanted to make things fair, because Sony has been gathering most of the profits and Disney wants to have a little bit more for the movie that they have done. And what's funny is that I've seen so many people who got so upset and are immediately blaming Disney in the whole scenario. And probably the most common complaint that I've seen from the people who blame Disney is that they say that, Disney is just being greedy. That this is probably a phrase that you have often heard so much on the people antagonizing Disney, saying that they've gotten too greedy because they wanted more money out of the Spider-Man movies. I don't know about you, but to be honest, that's pretty fair, to be very honest. What Disney is asking for, it makes common sense to me. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but yeah, I could see why Disney would want to come in and ask if they want to have a bit of a 50-50 split, or at least ask for a little bit more in terms of the profits of Spider-Man. Because, as I've stated before, in the current deal, Disney's the one who's doing most, if not everything, in terms of the creative process. It technically is their movie. Sony's the one that's distributing it, sure, but Disney's the one who's putting all their creative efforts, they're putting all their energy into it in order to make a Spider-Man movie that can fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is technically their film. It's their movie that they're putting all the money, they're putting all their resources, they're putting all their efforts into crafting this movie. And yet somehow, Sony's the one that's making most of the profit. Sony's the one that's making money out of Spider-Man when they're pretty much doing almost nothing for the movie itself. Like, they've contributed, like, they're pretty much making almost all the money on these Spider-Man movies by doing almost nothing on these films. And yet people are accusing Disney of being the greedy ones? Are you freaking kidding me, man? I think this really does goes to show that most people who do blame Disney in this case, those are the people who are already Disney haters in the first place. They already have this massive bias against Disney just because they're the ones who are on top in the entertainment industry. That like, people view them as having like a total monopoly, and that makes them the total bad guys in this scenario. So Sony's the one that's doing nothing wrong. They're the underdogs, and Disney's the one that is pure evil because everything they do is bad and so corrupted. Which, I gotta say right now, with that mentality, it is completely idiotic because there is no such thing as an underdog here. There is no such thing as a little guy because we are talking about two companies that are multi-billion-dollar corporations. One is no different than another. Yeah, sure, one is bigger than the other, but they're both essentially the same. Antagonizing or rooting for Sony is no different than antagonizing or rooting for Disney. So on that factor, I just need to say that yes, I do completely understand Disney's side of the whole situation. Now, granted, I do understand the scenario that technically Disney still does make a lot of money just on the merchandising alone. They still have a way to go and profit on it. And I do understand in that regard, on like maybe asking for 50-50 is a bit too much. Maybe it would have been a little bit more fair if they gave a little bit more to Sony, where Sony would have like either 60%. Hell, I even heard that there have been reports that Disney even offered a 70-30 share in Sony's favor. Like, they did ask for that, but Sony has still declined whatsoever. So in the case of greed, I do see that it is a little bit more Sony that's the one who might have a bit more of that sin than Disney. But then we also have Sony's side in the argument, what they have in stake, and why they want to have the same goal, why they want to go and keep things the same in terms of why they need the money for Spider-Man. Well, the thing is that after analyzing some stuff and seeing how things are going with Sony Pictures, honestly, I also do understand regarding Sony's side of the situation of why they need as much money as possible from Spider-Man, because let's be very honest, guys. Even though I've already stated that Sony Pictures is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, the thing with Sony Pictures is that without Spider-Man, Sony Pictures would be flat out dead. Let's be real, the company is not necessarily doing well on its own. I mean, they do have a few successful movies from time to time, but nowhere near the success of most of the other major studios like Warner Brothers or Universal or Disney, or like maybe like on par with Paramount and stuff like that, but they really are far behind in terms of all the major studios that are going on. And they need Spider-Man because so far, that is their most successful franchise. Like I said before, Far From Home has pretty much become their most successful movie that they have ever crafted. And Skyfall are the only movies that they own that has ever surpassed $1 billion. So they really are lacking behind. And honestly, with Spider-Man, not only is it their most successful franchise, but in truth, it is their only franchise that they could still make more stuff out of it and they can profit out of it. Because so far, in terms of the franchise that Sony Pictures owns, it's so far they either are up and coming, that they've had a few little successes before and they're trying out to see if they can make more sequels and if they can really capitalize on them as a franchise. You might have heard that they have a lot of upcoming stuff like Jumanji, or what else? They got Peter Rabbit, they got Ghostbusters 2020, and then of course they got the cinematic universe with all the Spider-Man villains like Venom, Morbius, and Kraven the Hunter. But then the current franchises that they do own right now, let's be real, they're pretty much dead in the water, or they have pretty much run dry. And this year in 2019 really does prove it that they're not doing well in terms of rebooting new franchises or trying to create franchises. Men in Black International was a massive box office flop. In fact, it's one of the biggest box office bombs of the year, and maybe it is a little bit too early to say this to this movie in particular, because you never know if it's going to be a sleeper hit in the veins of The Secret Life of Pets 2, but with the Angry Birds movie 2, it is off to a terrible start. It is not doing well so far financially. And in the case of Spider-Man, they really do need it. Sony needs it very much, especially with the fact that with some of the other movies that they have done on their own, or at least the ones that they have released last year, they have found some legitimate success, especially with the surprise smash hit of Venom, and also a little bit from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as well. So they know that their most profitable franchise and their most valuable franchise that they have within the entire studio, it is Spider-Man. And without it, well, you might have heard about the rumors like a long time ago that there might be a chance that the Sony Corporation might go and sell their film and television division and all that kind of stuff. If it weren't for Spider-Man, Sony would be more than happy to throw that thing in the garbage or just immediately sell it to another company like either Time Warner or Comcast. Like, they would be okay with just selling them out, and that's pretty much it. But because of Spider-Man, that's so far the only thing that's keeping Sony Pictures among the ranks of the major studios. Otherwise, they would go a little bit in the way of STX Entertainment, where their future is pretty much uncertain. And sadly, even with that, I've actually read so many legitimate reports where they would actually state that it doesn't necessarily matter because in the future, there is a strong chance that Sony Pictures might end up being bought out by a major company like Comcast or Time Warner or whatever. Like, there is still that chance that it could happen in the near future, as close to like 2 years. I think I read that in a Forbes article actually stated that. So just to give you guys a little bit of a clarification, but I think that really does highlight about Sony's side about why they need all the profit that they need from Spider-Man, because otherwise they would pretty much be very close to shutting down. So in terms of that, overall, when you do see like what both sides want, it may be for different reasons, but they both pretty much want the same goal. They want to have as much money as they can. Where you got Sony's side, where they need it for the sake of survival in this ever-growing industry. And then you got Disney for the sake of fairness, because they were the ones who actually made the entire movie, and they want to go and actually get rewarded for their efforts. So on that note, I do understand why there are people that would say it's both the company's fault. And I do get that. I could see where both of them are responsible for this. And yeah, I do kind of agree on that as well. Maybe I would say also that maybe both are to blame as well. But if I would be in a position where if I would have to pick one of them to say that they are to blame for the entire fallout of this, I would honestly lean a little bit more towards Sony. I would say it's probably a little bit more their fault, considering that they're the ones who are obviously a little bit more desperate, where Disney was just looking out for a bit more fairness in terms of the effort that they put in onto Spider-Man and regain some popularity for him in terms of appearing in movies and playing out in all different scenarios in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But now, in this scenario, now that we are in a position where Spider-Man is no longer a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and is just left with Sony, the big question remains is just, now what? What is going to happen with Spider-Man with these movies? And there are some reports that do come out that state that Now that Spider-Man only belongs to Sony Pictures, they want to go and try to incorporate him a little bit more in their movies, and maybe potentially having Spider-Man appear in some of the spin-off films, like maybe appear in Venom 2 or maybe appear in Morbius and stuff like that. But there are some things that I will say is actually very concerning, and I'm just going to say number one, and this might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I do feel like now in this position, I feel like Sony needs to let go of Tom Holland. They can no longer use him as Spider-Man whatsoever, because I have heard reports that they are considering to have him in more movies, and technically Tom Holland is still in contract to appear in a couple more Spider-Man films. But the reason I say that they shouldn't continue using Tom Holland as Spider-Man is mainly because Sony has some massive shoes to fill. Like, now they gotta go and continue doing more Spider-Man films, but they cannot use any more connections to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the thing is, if they continue using Tom Holland, then that's gonna be proven to be extremely difficult. Because in terms of the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, they are heavily rooted to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I know that some people have stated that technically, yes, you could watch stuff like Homecoming and Far From Home without necessarily a whole lot of the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You don't need to watch like all the other films in order to watch like Homecoming and Far From Home. But in terms of the narrative aspects that happen in those movies, they are deeply rooted into the events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially when you add in the factor that that Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark, like that's Peter Parker's mentor. Like Tony Stark is the guy that Spider-Man looks up to and teaches him the ways of becoming a true superhero. And even with Far From Home, like, it is really important to see the elements of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially when it deals with the events that happened after Avengers Endgame and the events leading afterwards of how this psychologically affects Peter Parker now that Tony Stark is unfortunately gone. So the thing is, if you want to try to go and continue that, then you're obviously continuing the Spider-Man movies without any of those contexts, and it's gonna make it extremely awkward when you're gonna have Tom Holland's Spider-Man going around without like bringing up or noticing any of the events that actually occurred in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or how Spider-Man became how he is today without any form of those contexts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I feel like this is just a recipe for disaster, and really it's just going to end up with a massive backlash from audiences. And then you look into the aspect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, now that they have to continue without Spider-Man, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a chance that there would be some consequences in there. That if it could happen a little bit, that there is that chance that maybe the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies could suffer a little bit without the inclusion of bringing up Spider-Man or bringing up what Peter Parker has done in the previous films, especially like with Homecoming and Far From Home. And that is going to be even worse, because that will bring up a massive backlash, but people are not going to be angry at Disney or Marvel. They're going to pin the blame on Sony. You saw the poll that I have done where most people immediately pin the blame on Sony, and you saw that audience's reaction, they mostly blame on Sony. So like, either way, whatever's going to happen, whether it be on the solo Spider-Man films or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if either of them are suffering, then you know for a fact that Sony's going to be the one that will mostly take the blame on this. And also, I just want to say right now that Sony better make a deal with Disney and Marvel right now, because the thing is, with Disney, they're not just going to let this go and walk away. You know, they're not just going to go and accept the fact that, oh, well, we're never going to have Spider-Man, I guess we'll just walk away right now. That's not going to happen. With Disney, they're either going to go and do things the easy way, or they're going to do things the hard way. Because it's not going to be surprising if Disney would go as far as full-on sabotaging Sony Pictures. Like, they will do whatever it takes to make sure they can put things back to normal. Disney could even go and full-on make every single Sony Pictures film, especially like with the Spider-Man films. They will do all they can in order to beat them down on the ground, to make Sony lose millions upon millions of dollars and put them in a position where they're struggling so hard where they would have no choice but to sell the film rights to Disney. So it's going to happen either way, that Disney is going to have negotiations with Sony to have the deal happen where they're going to have it the easy way, where they will have a better negotiation and have a better deal with the upcoming Spider-Man films, or they can go and do things the hard way. But either way, the future right now, it's looking dark for Sony Pictures. And if they want to go and set things right, they better do something as soon as possible to make a deal with Disney. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day something does happen, because this is not necessarily the first time, which in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that we've seen massive controversy, but then suddenly things would go right in the end. We've seen this happen with James Gunn, where after his fallout last year, where Disney decided to drop him because of a tactic by the neo-Nazis, they want to go and months later decided, okay, you know what, never mind, we're bringing him back and he'll go and write and direct Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And I wouldn't be surprised if probably in the future this will happen, that Sony and Disney will find a way to collaborate and they will have a better deal so that Spider-Man will continue to appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff like that. That would not surprise me whatsoever. So there is still that chance, and they have stated that technically the deal is not necessarily over. Like, there is still that chance that like they could collaborate on something, but honestly we'll just have to wait and see. But that's pretty much my entire thoughts on the whole situation. That's pretty much my thoughts on the scenario regarding Sony versus Disney on the whole Spider-Man split. I do feel like this is there's going to be more catastrophic results against Sony, but maybe in the future we will see something bright that could happen in regards to Disney. Or I'm sure in the future we'll see something that can work out for Spider-Man, and that he'll still continue to appear in Sony films and also in Disney films. So with that said, I would like to go into the chat wall, and I want to know from you guys, what do you all think about the whole controversy? What are your thoughts on the whole Spider-Man split and Disney versus Sony? Do you side with Sony on this? Do you side with Disney on this? Do you blame both of them? Let me know what you all think. Whew, that was quite a mouthful in this scenario. Oh boy, alright. Okay, I'm sure you guys have a lot to say on this. Let me see, what do we have in terms of comments? Okay, let's see. Sony sounds rather childish, like a kid who doesn't want to share their toy. Maybe Disney jumped the gun, but Sony not wanting to discuss it like adults show why I side with Jeremy Renner, especially when they have a history of shooting themselves in the foot, like Ghostbusters 2016, for example. Please don't kill Uncle Ben for what feels like the 1,000,000th time of the century. But dude, we have to say, with great power, like, who's gonna come in and say with great power comes great responsibility? We need a constant reminder of that, because you know how audiences are. They have the memory of a goldfish. Who's going to remember what Uncle Ben has said to them? Oh boy. Anyways, let's see now. If Disney has 50% of the rights, can they make their own Spider-Man film that's mainly from Walt Disney Animation Studios? If Sony has 50%, can they still make more Spider-Verse? Who will win in this battle, Sony or Disney? Now this situation is turning into a married couple problem. I'll probably blame Sony, because if you think about their reputation in TV and film and stuff, do you think people would trust Sony after their dark past, especially with animation? Yeah, you do bring up a good point, and that's mainly because why you do see so many people that are against Sony in this case, because, like, regardless, even if they have done Spider-Verse, people still do not trust Sony Pictures with making Spider-Man movies, especially with the disastrous attempts with the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Like, those things were just a total mess, and they were like full-on disasters for Sony. In fact, they were the biggest disasters for Sony before the Sony hack actually came in. But in regard of the whole deal, like with what you just said, yeah. And say what you will about Venom. I know that people are entirely split, but still, with those mixed reactions, that's another element on why people don't necessarily trust Sony onto making more Spider-Man films. Because with Venom, it's got mixed reactions, but with movies like Homecoming and Far From Home, there's a lot more of a positive reception coming from there. Okay, let's see. I wouldn't be mad about this shift, and I'd take it in stride if it weren't for Far From Home's major cliffhanger. I won't say what it is for the sake of spoilers, but I'll gladly anticipate new Spider-Verse content. As to who the true culprit is, all I want to do is point at both Sony and Disney and say, in the words of Black Panther, "You were wrong. All of you were wrong." Yeah, and that does bring up a very good point into the factor of how it seems impossible for Sony right now to continue making Spider-Man films with Tom Holland, especially with the factor that Far From Home ended off on a massive cliffhanger. How can you continue that? Like, how can you continue making more Tom Holland Spider-Man films without mentioning anything on the Marvel Cinematic Universe when you ended Far From Home on a massive cliffhanger that is massively rooted onto the events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? It just makes no sense. That's honestly why I feel like it's for the best for Sony to just let go of all this. And if they want to reboot a new Spider-Man movie, they could go ahead. It's probably better than trying to make a new Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland that could potentially lead to massive fan backlash. Let's see now. What else do we got? I'm on the side of Disney. They just wanted a fair share of the Spider-Man deal, but Sony not wanted the Marvel studio to help with them is disrespectful. I would rather Apple or Viacom to buy off the company. Yeah, and that's also something that you do see a lot of people say that I was like, when is Sony Pictures gonna be bought out? When is the Sony Corporation gonna be bought out? Like, a lot of people are just fed up with Sony Pictures crap. Let's see. This is true. Both companies have spent so much time trying to make money off of the characters that they've lost sight of what fans want. They obviously care more about wallet sizes than telling compelling stories or letting the fans just have good content for once. Say what you will about Tom Holland, but at least he was home where he belonged. It absolutely sucks that they wanted to end his journey far from home. I feel like this situation would be better fixed if Sony bought Disney. Or you mean the other way around, because Sony, like, even with the Sony Corporation, they're still too small to completely buy out Disney. And especially Sony Pictures. I mean, there's a much bigger chance that Disney would buy Sony Pictures than really Sony Pictures buying Disney. That would just be too insane. Let's see now. Let's see. So many people are blaming which one was at fault. If you want my opinion, I think it's both their faults. One is greedy and the other is incompetent. I hope the future they both come in agreement that both had problems, that they can fix this broken contract. Perhaps maybe we could use him one at a time. I know it sounds like nonsense, but you never know. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Let's see, what else do we got? Even though I don't watch superhero movies, this move is such a blow. But blaming both companies cause of obvious reasons, then you know why. I think Sony could still survive because they have other divisions like PlayStation. So take this as a lesson: companies are not your friends. They can do some shady things, behind the scenes. Well, I mean, regardless, the Sony Corporation is going to survive for sure. Like the Sony Corporation, they could still survive very prominently with their with their electronics, and of course with the PlayStation asset. It's just right now, Sony Pictures, their film and television division, that's not really doing as strong as a lot of the other elements from Sony. Or even they're doing much weaker than even the music division of the Sony Corporation. That's the one that has the problem. Sony, that is the division that without Spider-Man they would crumble into pieces. Okay, so I'm gonna go and read one more comment, and let's see. Let's go into here. One more comment, then we're gonna move on to our next story. I 100% disagree with your opinion. I don't care if you want to blame Sony. I'm still blaming on both studios right now. I said that I understand and would blame both studios. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, I will not believe Sony will lose so much as they are owned by the Japanese. They still got some hits outside of Spider-Man films, like the 9th Quentin Tarantino film. Yes, that is true. You do bring up a good point that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is so far is so far one of two of Sony's big hits this year, like with Far From Home and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That is true. Both studios should have worked out for the deal, and then we wouldn't have had this fallout. It's still both studios' fault. Okay, so let me just have a drink. Alright, man, that was definitely quite a mouthful, and definitely had a lot to say in this scenario, but I think we are pretty much all good with this story, or at least for now, because you never know if there's any updates that are going to be happening in the future. We will wait and see, but I know that this is something that many people will be keeping an eye on. But with that said now, let us go and move on to our next story, and we're going to talk about a little bit of celebrity gossip. I know that does seem like a very strange subject to get into in AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, but there is a good reason as to why I would bring this up in particular. And I'm talking about the recent events that are happening with the divorce of Miley Cyrus and Liam Hemsworth. That seems to be the big celebrity news that is happening right now that people are really talking about, and some people have really speculated as to why there is a divorce, and even a lot of rumors have been spreading around regarding why is it that Miley Cyrus divorced Liam Hemsworth, or I think it's the other way around, why Liam Hemsworth decided to split up with Miley Cyrus. And because of all those rumors and conspiracy theories that are spreading around, Miley Cyrus this week decided to go and come clean on Twitter and decided to speak out about the whole situation. And let me just go on Twitter where you have, she pretty much put out an entire thread where she said, "I can accept that the life I've chosen means I must live completely open and transparent with my fans who I love and the public 100% of the time. What I cannot accept is being told I'm lying to cover up a crime I haven't committed. I have nothing to hide." And from there, she decided to go and reveal all of her sins that she has committed throughout the years and throughout her career as an influential pop icon. She pretty much laid everything out just to really emphasize that she has nothing to hide, and that what the media is covering about the whole divorce has just taken it too far. And I will say, in regards to Miley Cyrus, I really do feel sorry for her, because yeah, she has done some really stupid stuff in the past, but you could tell that right now she has grown up. She has definitely matured over the years, and that her little phase of twerking and being nasty and stuff like that, she has moved on from it. So I really do feel sorry for her in that regard. And going back into this news, going back into what she has talked about, she would go and discuss about many things. She pretty much talked about the way that she has done drugs and that she would party all the time back in her younger days. And she even mentioned, just reading some of the tweets that she has done, my biggest song to date is about dancing on Molly and snorting lines in the bathroom. I effed up and cheated in relationships when I was young. I lost a massive Walmart deal at 17 for ripping a bong. I swung on a wrecking ball naked. Oh, that one we know for sure. There are probably more nudes of me on the internet than maybe any woman in history. But the one that I want to go and discuss about in particular, and this is the reason why it fits very well in this podcast right over here, why it fits very well in AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, it's mainly because of the 5th tweet in this thread, as it says, hold on, can we make it bigger? Perfect. I got kicked off of Hotel Transylvania for buying Liam a penis cake for his birthday and licking it. And that's what we are talking about today. The reveal of why Miley Cyrus got kicked off of Hotel Transylvania. And I'm going to go and read a little bit from my source here from The Hollywood Reporter, as it states, it was announced on November 2011 that Cyrus, the star at the time of the hit Disney series Hannah Montana, which ran from 2006 to 2011, was cast as the teenage vampire Mavis, the daughter of Adam Sandler's Dracula. Her departure from the project came in February of 2012, with neither the studio nor Cyrus's reps giving a reason for her exit. A few days later, it was announced that Selena Gomez would be replacing Cyrus. So that's pretty much the main thing. If you guys don't recall, it was back in early 2012 actually. It was not long after the Hannah Montana series officially ended, and there were leaked pictures that came out, or maybe like they were purposely posted or whatever, but there were actually pictures that were revealed, and I'm just gonna say right now, I am not going to show them here. I will not show them on Twitch, and I will not show them on YouTube, because those pictures, I'm sure they would break some rules in the terms of services. So I highly suggest, if you really are curious about those pictures, you go look at them yourself, because the thing is, these pictures, they pretty much contain, it's a photo of Miley Cyrus showing a picture of a cake, and it says, "Happy birthday, Liam," and on it, it's a penis. There's no denying. It's unmistakable. It's a full-on penis. You got the boober, you got the schlong, and you got the balls. And to top it all off, you also got a little bit of hair. You know, just a little bit of garnish, just right, like right in the middle of the balls, just to add in a little bit of texture, to add in, to really spice things up on the pingus. And then there's also a second picture with that penis cake where Miley Cyrus is just going all at it. Like, she's just really going in, where she was both hungry and thirsty for the cake. It was like, give me some of that. Yeah, I think it was safe to say that it was full on nasty. But apparently, those pictures cost Miley Cyrus her role in Hotel Transylvania as Mavis, and ended up being replaced as Selena Gomez. Now, you might be wondering, this seems like a ridiculous reason to fire Miley Cyrus. And, looking at it right now, I can understand in today's age, it does seem rather curious that this is the reason why they decided to go and kick her out of Hotel Transylvania just because of those little pictures. Like, maybe, yeah, they are a little bit scandalous, but you gotta think about, like, the framing at the time, because I think there's no hiding that the reason why Sony hired Miley Cyrus to play as Mavis, it's not because of her talent whatsoever. Like, it is purely for marketing reasons. Like, they want to have a Disney Channel starlet to star in their animated feature, or at the very least to be one of the stars. So they wanted to go and find someone who is pure and innocent, and what other company that's pretty much perfect for that image of pure and innocent than Disney? So they decided, okay, we're pretty much going to go and capitalize on Hannah Montana by putting her in our Hotel Transylvania movie. But from there, like, not long afterwards, as you probably guys know, like, for those of you who do follow Miley Cyrus, then you may know that immediately after Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus decided to just go wild. She decided that she's gonna pretty much completely change her image, where she pretty much broke free from the chains of Disney, and now she could be as wild and nasty as she wants. Hungry for dick, doing drugs, twerking 24/7, like she would go full on crazy. One of which also is that Miley Cyrus would just come in and she would present that penis cake to her then husband or boyfriend, Liam Hemsworth. And apparently, like, that just seems a little too scandalous. Like, now, the purpose of why they brought in Miley Cyrus is pretty much full-on gone. Now she's no longer viewed as the pure and innocent starlet from Disney Channel. So that's why they pretty much got rid of her and decided to bring in another Disney Channel starlet, which is Selena Gomez, which I think she was also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she was the star of The Wizards of Waverly Place. So they decided, okay, we're just gonna go and immediately replace her. Now, I know that does seem strange, but I think the reason why people seem a little bit confused and weirded out of the fact that this is the reason why Sony Pictures decided to kick out Miley Cyrus in this scenario, I think it is mainly because, like, why people are weirded out right now, it's actually because we live in a completely different culture. We live in a completely different age. And I would actually say it's because of the hashtag #MeToo movement. The reasons why we have to kick off of someone from a project, like those standards are now completely different than how it was back then. Because you look back, back then, it doesn't, like, yeah, nowadays it may not seem like much, because nowadays, like, the standards of kicking away someone or, like, getting rid of someone from a project, it's mainly because they have done something that really seems harmful, or it really seems hate-filled. You know, something like sexual harassment or full-on bigotry. Like, a great example of someone getting kicked out nowadays that seems like a very justifiable reason is Louis C.K. When he had his full-on hashtag #MeToo controversy revealed, and that he admitted to all that, then you would have Universal and Illumination Entertainment decided, you know what, screw him. They kicked him out of The Secret Life of Pets 2, which he already voiced the main character in the first one, and ultimately replaced him with Patton Oswalt for the sequel. Like, that is perfectly understandable. That's perfectly justifiable, and honestly, that's probably one great thing that Illumination has done, especially with the fact that in the sequel, say what you will about The Secret Life of Pets 2, but Patton Oswalt did deliver a pretty solid performance. But then you would see this. Of course it would seem strange right now, because it's Miley Cyrus with a penis cake for her lover, for her partner. And that doesn't seem like much now, because, like, what she was doing, she's not necessarily harming anyone. She's not necessarily hurting anybody. She's not putting out some kind of far-right hate speech with it. All she's doing is just that she has a penis cake and she wants to eat the penis. Like, that's all it is. Like, nowadays, maybe you won't see anyone really getting fired for that. But that's probably the reason why you would see so many people like weirded out and think that it is a stupid reason why you would fire anyone just for pictures of a penis cake. But there is one thing that I will say about all this, and honestly, the more that I would think about it, the more that I think about the reason why Sony kicked out Miley Cyrus from Hotel Transylvania for those photos, the more I realize not only is this massively stupid, but it is massively hypocritical of Sony Pictures to go and do that. Now, you might be wondering, why would I think that? Why would I go and say that? Because here's the thing. Miley Cyrus got kicked off of Hotel Transylvania. No, actually, no. A better way to say this is that because of the penis cake photos, Miley Cyrus got kicked out of an Adam Sandler movie. An Adam Sandler movie. You guys know very well that what Miley Cyrus has done with those photos, they would seem very commonplace in an Adam Sandler movie. Like, whatever dumb movie that he has released in the past, stuff like Jack and Jill, or That's My Boy, or whatever, like, all those dumb movies, or even like with the Grown Ups films, for example, you could totally see Adam Sandler making some kind of stupid joke where a penis cake would somehow be involved, and one of the characters would go in going, ah. That would seem no different. And on top of that, many of those movies, like Grown Ups and That's My Boy and Jack and Jill, those were actually distributed by Sony Pictures. So you know for a fact that Sony would be completely okay with Adam Sandler showing some kind of joke with the penis cake and put them in theaters under the Sony Pictures banner. You know that they would be perfectly fine. And yet, with Hotel Transylvania, even though Adam Sandler, and especially the fact that with Adam Sandler, you know that he has done jokes that are much worse than the penis cake photos that Miley Cyrus had, and yet, they are perfectly fine with having Adam Sandler not only star in the movie, but also be, like, the executive producer. Like, to have Drac literally be the big boss of the hotel and of the entire movie itself. Or, now at this point, the entire movie franchise. But oh, wait, there's more. Yes, there is actually a little bit more, because it's not just Adam Sandler. You gotta think about also another co-star in this. Another prominent star of the Hotel Transylvania franchise, Andy Samberg. And you know very well with Andy Samberg, he's not just an actor, he's not just a comedian, but he is also a musician with The Lonely Island. And some of the popular songs that he has done would include Dick in a Box and Jizz in My Pants, featuring jokes that would be on the same level or like would even surpass the penis cake photos from Miley Cyrus. And yet, even with those songs on Andy Samberg's discography, Sony Pictures is perfectly fine with having Andy Samberg be one of the stars of their animated kids films. Or not just Hotel Transylvania, but keep in mind, this is not the only time. Even right after releasing songs like Dick in a Box and Jizz in My Pants, they're also perfectly okay with having Andy Samberg being Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So now there are several movies that Sony is perfectly okay with having Andy Samberg over making those kinds of dick jokes in his past. So here's the big picture. With Adam Sandler and Andy Samberg, they can go and make all the stupid dick jokes that they want, and they can also be stars of their animated films that are geared towards kids. But when Miley Cyrus would go and do that, somehow that's just taking it too far, and they would just throw her out. Somehow, like, that's not okay for Miley Cyrus. Don't you see the hypocrisy in that? Do you see where, like, there's really this unjust, this injustice that's going on that apparent, like, and even, like, I'm not fully accusing Sony of being that, but you can see that there is also a little bit of sexism in there, where the guys are perfectly okay to make as many weird and stupid dick jokes as they want, but when the girl does it, apparently that's going too far, and they decided to just immediately kick her out of the production. Like, for some reason they just don't want that. It's not only dumb, but you could see the massive hypocrisy in this. But overall, though, now that we are in an age where we have moved on and Hotel Transylvania has pretty much become an entire franchise, there are some people out there that they would have a bit of a what-if scenario. Like, what if Miley Cyrus was actually Mavis instead of Selena Gomez? Would there be much of a difference? Would there be a totally different impact to the Hotel Transylvania franchise? And if I could bring up my opinion, I would say absolutely not. There would be nothing that would change for two reasons. Number one, as I've already stated before, when it comes to Miley Cyrus and casting her as Mavis, like, the whole thing was not because of her talent, it was purely for marketing purposes, that Sony wanted to go and find a Disney Channel starlet to be the star of their animated kids film. And that's why they're so easily replaceable. That's why, that's why Sony had no trouble at all to just to easily decide that for some small stupid reason, they could just kick her out and replace her with another Disney Channel starlet. So it really would not make that much of a difference. And reason number 2 is honestly because, well, the thing is, let's be real, Mavis is one of the most forgettable characters in the Hotel Transylvania franchise. Yeah, she's definitely the most marketable, but she barely does jack all. And the thing is, this is not a smack against Selena Gomez or Miley Cyrus or whatever. It's just she is so poorly written. She is so bland of a character that for the most part, she feels very insignificant. Like, she mostly feels like she's just there for the purpose of plot convenience, then actually adding something into it. And on top of that, with the way that she is written, she has no personality whatsoever. Like, full on bland as the color of her skin. And from there, even if she does present any form of personality, that would just be because the writers decided to completely rip off what Disney has already done with their Disney princesses, especially with Ariel. So the thing is with Mavis, there is no amount of acting that can help her out to grow as an actual character because there's nothing to grow to begin with. And the only reason why she is popular, it's purely because of her looks. It is just because of her design that people are just ogling at her because, oh, she's the cute vampire goth girl. And that's literally just it. And like that's why I feel like it wouldn't make that much of an impact because there is no amount of acting that can actually help Mavis, that can make Mavis stand out as a legitimate character when she's not even much of a character to begin with. And honestly, at this point, I would not be surprised if I have already pissed off some Hotel Transylvania fans. I mean, it's already enough that they're pissed off at me because of my reviews, but I think adding this as well is now salt to an open wound. Oh boy, but yeah, honestly, I feel like this is just something that I wanted to cover, and it's a perfect story for AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, and it does add in some interesting trivia as to why they had to go and recast Mavis in the movies, because penis cakes. It's like, how did Selena Gomez get the role of Mavis in Hotel Transylvania? Well, that's because of Miley Cyrus's penis cake. That's all you can pretty much say about it. And with that said, let us now go onto the chat wall right over here. And I want to ask, what do you guys think about this entire scenario? How do you feel about Sony kicking out Miley Cyrus because of her penis cake photos from Hotel Transylvania? Do you think that Sony is justifiable for doing that? Do you think it's a stupid reason for Sony Pictures to do so? And would you rather see Miley Cyrus voice Mavis than Selena Gomez? Let me know what you think. Let's see now. Miley Cyrus is a representation on why people hate celebrities. Miley Cyrus during that time wasn't as good and was kind of disturbing and disgusting in her music career anyways. With that said, there wasn't really any reason for Sony to fire her. That's just what is happening in her own personal life, and it isn't really anything super bad. Also, you forgot how Sony fired Miley Cyrus for this, yet kept CeeLo Green as Mummy, despite Green was accused of sexual battery by a woman with whom he had dined. Oh, that is true. But then again, with the case of CeeLo, oh god, yeah. That is definitely true, and I think that really does make things worse for Sony Pictures. I think it really does. I think in the future they did fix that up a little bit, because I know the Mummy guy was eventually later voiced by Keegan-Michael Key in the sequels, but Yeah, you do bring up a very good point that apparently the penis cake is enough to go and fire her, but apparently the allegations against CeeLo Green, like, they didn't care and keep him. Like, yeah, they're, like, I think, again, that also highlights a massive hypocrisy in Sony Pictures. Like, honestly, it only makes things worse for Sony. Okay, let's see now. I guess, oh no, oh no, did I read that one? No, I didn't. Okay. I guess this has gone too far for Miley, for her. There must be somewhat certified porn star. I'm very shocked to say this, but I was bombarded with some or more Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball meme or music video, and even lots of it, like Nicki Minaj's Anaconda cover. And what's the moral of this? Everyone on Twitter should have taught her a lesson. For that, God help us. Oh, excuse me. But, okay, let's see. Moving right along. Funny enough, something like this happened to my family, sort of. My uncle once gave to his fiancée a chocolate cake shaped like breasts, and boy, did it taste terrible. I was very conflicted about it because they were living in a country that's against public erotic products, especially in cakes. But we had a laugh about it, and nothing scandalous happened afterwards. Okay. No, I think it happens. Let's see. I think if Miley Cyrus played Mavis in the Hotel Transylvania franchise, there would have been some backlash from parents because of the Wrecking Ball video destroying Cyrus's kid-friendly image. Oh, really? Really? There would be some backlash. How could there be backlash on Miley Cyrus? Really? So, backlash, there would be massive backlash on Miley Cyrus. But again, it's a movie with Adam Sandler and Andy Samberg, and then you also got CeeLo Green. And the focus somehow is on Miley Cyrus? Again, this highlights the freaking hypocrisy. Like, why wouldn't you think there would be backlash against, like, Adam Sandler doing a kid's film? Or, like, freaking Andy Samberg doing a kid's film after Dick in a Box? Or CeeLo Green doing a kid's film after the allegations that he beat up a woman? Come on, that's an idiotic ideology. Come on, that's an idiotic mind process, man. Come on. Like, that's not an excuse for defending Sony. That's just stupid. Okay, so I think with that said, do we have any more? Oh, okay. Let's see. I'll read one more. There might be another reason why Sony kicked out of her, because kids usually look up to Disney Channel celebrities, and they would instantly love and with those penis cake photos, it might be rubbed off the kids the wrong way. So Sony must have hired Selena Gomez since she didn't have anything bad Cyrus did. It could be why. Well, yeah, of course. That's definitely the reason. That's why, like, these Disney Channel starlets are just so interchangeable. And that's why Sony only, like, for the casting of Mavis, it was purely for marketing reasons. Alright, let me just have some water on this. Alright, so with that said, I think it is now time that we will move on to our next story. And finally, for once we're gonna leave Sony to rest, because they're already in enough trouble with the whole Spider-Man split. So now we're gonna move on to our next story, in which we're gonna go onto Netflix. And with Netflix right now, they have actually revealed a new reboot that is going on, since She-Ra is actually doing extremely well with the help of DreamWorks Animation. Now it's gonna be time for the boy to have his time to shine. And I'm talking about, of course, for He-Man. Yes, there is going to be a brand new anime series of He-Man Masters of the Universe, which is going to be run by Kevin Smith. And it was actually Kevin Smith who has actually announced that he is going to be in charge of making a series called Masters of the Universe Revelation. Let me read a little bit from my source here on Variety, as it states about this series. The new series titled Masters of the Universe Revelation will take place in the Mattel toy-inspired world and will focus on some of the unresolved storylines of the classic 80s show. Smith will serve as a showrunner and executive producer. When talking about this series in particular, Kevin Smith put up a quote here, and it states, "I'm eternally grateful to Mattel TV and Netflix." Oh, good God, man. That pun was just oof, oh boy, even you could do better than that, dude. Anyways, going back to what I was talking about. I'm eternally grateful to Marvel TV, to Mattel TV, sorry about that, and Netflix for entrusting me with not only the secrets of Grayskull, but also their entire universe. In Revelation, we pick up right where the classic era left off to tell an epic tale of what may be the final battle between He-Man and Skeletor, brought to life with the most metal character designs Powerhouse Animation can contain in the frame. This is the Masters of the Universe story you've always wanted to see as a kid. We also got another quote here from Rob David, Mattel, which is the executive producer and vice president of Mattel TV and the author of He-Man, The Eternity War, which has stated, Masters of the Universe has been a cultural phenomenon for generations, inspiring fans to discover their own power within. Fans of this franchise have been waiting for this continuation of these characters, and Kevin Smith, as a Masters superfan himself, is the perfect champion and partner to expand the canon through a dynamic animation series on Netflix. And of course, for those of you who don't necessarily know, this is actually from Powerhouse Animation, which is actually the studio that brought you the animation for Netflix's Castlevania series. And from there, we also got some writers that are involved, including Eric Carrasco, Tim Sheridan, Dia Mishra, and Mark Bernardin. Okay, so we got those people, and that's pretty much the big scenario that is happening with this new Masters of the Universe series. And when I read about this, when I looked into like what's going on with this whole franchise, I think honestly the biggest priority for this series, like the number one audience that they want to try to go and catch, it's for the He-Man fans. Like, this is really for the sake of nostalgia. And I feel like what they're trying to do with this series in particular is very similar with Season 5 of Samurai Jack. Like, the whole point of this is to go and try to wrap up and tie loose ends of, like, some of the mysteries that happen in the original series. Because there are some elements that were left unconcluded in the 80s series, and now with this new Masters of the Universe revelation, the purpose of that will be to go and answer many of those questions that happened in the past, and even saying that, I think Kevin Smith even stated that that like this will even highlight the final battle between He-Man and Skeletor. So that's the whole thing. Like, sure, this could be probably a whole continuation of a series. Like, there will be like a season 2 and season 3, unlike Samurai Jack, where it's meant to be like the finale of everything. Where in here, however, the big difference is that like it's meant to be really a series for the fans. It really is something for them that they want to go and really expand onto like what they have really reveled in the past before. Like, this one is a lot, like this one wants to be connected to its original series a lot more than what She-Ra is currently doing right now with the DreamWorks series, where that one is a lot more of a reimagining. It's a new take on the character for a brand new audience, and so far that show has been doing extremely well, and it's so far one of the highest rated animated series that you can actually find on Netflix. On top of one of the best animated series from DreamWorks released for Netflix, like run on top with the whole Tales of Arcadia franchise with Troll Hunters and Three Below. But this one right over here, like, it really is for nostalgia purposes, and I could totally imagine that in terms of the art style, like with how they want to execute it, they want to try to go and really make it as epic as possible. Like, that's why they said that this is going to be an anime He-Man series where they really want to put in a new twist on the art style, and I don't know if they're going to make it equally as violent as the Castlevania series, but they do want to put up, like, something where the action is going to be a massive highlight, where it's going to be all about the designs, it's all going to be, it's all going to be about having this epic look where it's going to really emphasize on having cool action, where you're going to have a bunch of people fighting off monsters. Like you want to have some real badass moments. Like, they want to go and try to create a real badass series while also emphasizing elements of the original show, like to make sure they can connect things with one another and to go and solve some mysteries that were left undetermined in the original franchise. So that seems to be what the original idea is all about. And honestly, I do have good faith in Powerhouse Animation and on Netflix and on Kevin Smith that they could actually pull off something pretty cool, or at the very least, something that the fans are going to be really anticipating for, like something that the fans would love to have, something that they have been waiting for many years, and that they could finally feel satisfied, that they could feel like they finally had the conclusion that they never knew they wanted for so long. And for me, I've never grown up with anything from He-Man, but I know that I can recognize that this is a series for them, and honestly, I really do wish the best of luck for Powerhouse Animation, for Kevin Smith, and for Netflix to pull this off. Maybe they can do something pretty awesome for it, so who knows how this is going to go, but I know that this is definitely a series for the fans, much more than what She-Ra has pulled off. Okay, so with that said, I would like to go into the chat wall, and I want to know what you guys think about this whole scenario. I want to know what you think about the new series, Masters of the Universe Revelation. Is this a series that you guys would be excited to go and check out? Were you a He-Man fan when you were younger? Would you be willing to check this series out? Let me know what you guys think. Alright, so let's see now. Since you did bring this up, my dad actually has a DVD of the episode at home. He really enjoys He-Man, and I can't wait to tell him about it. He-Man is a pretty good show in my opinion for what I saw in the original. You said the show is being brought to you by the people who made Castlevania. This might be a bit more mature and a lot darker than something like the original or She-Ra. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm expecting because they're bringing in Powerhouse Animation. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to go in a more darker tone, or they're going to take themselves a little bit more seriously than they had before. Like, maybe some humor will be injected in from time to time, but in regards to, like, the whole tone of it, because of the involvement of Powerhouse, I'm sure they're going to try to take things more seriously and really put emphasis on the action. Let's see. What else do we got? Since I rarely watch He-Man, I don't know if I'll be keeping my eye out on this, like the new Dark Crystal show. However, maybe I'll give it a chance if this version of He-Man says, "Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah." Oh my god. That's I'm not gonna lie, that's probably my favorite thing from He-Man. I know it's not officially from He-Man, but if you ask me my favorite thing of He-Man, if it's anything, it's literally that music video. And there are times, like, sometimes I would find myself just singing it and, like, throwing my head back, just going, like, "Hey, yeah, 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 hey, yeah, yeah. I say, hey, what's going on?" Oh my god, so a beautiful piece of internet history right there. Ah, beautiful. I love it. Love that thing. Let's see now. I think this new He-Man is becoming an anime. I can assure if this new He-Man is becoming an anime, which it is, I can assure it's going to have a lot of detail in the designs. If that's the case, it makes me wonder why She-Ra can't have the amount of detail in their designs, and that was inspired by anime. In fact, why couldn't She-Ra have the details as the Legend of Korra series, which was also anime inspired? Well, I mean, like, if they're, like, I guess it's all about the tone of the show. Like, if they would go into an anime style, would it fit with the tone that the series has already established? I think that's the big thing to go and highlight, because designs aren't just, like, to make things look cool. They gotta really connect with one another, and they gotta connect with the show. They gotta connect with the writing. They gotta connect with the voice acting. Like, would that style fit with the style that the series is setting up? That's the big question. Let's see now. I'm willing to check this out, especially considering that I've watched the original series along with the original She-Ra back when Teletoon Retro was active. I have watched the new I haven't watched the new She-Ra yet, but this new series could be interesting. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Okay, and with that said, I think now it is time that we shall go into the grand finale. And oh boy, I think this episode has gone longer than I thought, honestly. But yes, now it is time that we're gonna go and jump onto the grand finale of all this. And let's be honest here, this week there hasn't been much entertainment news story, or even like, let alone animation news stories going on, especially when everybody was mainly focusing on the whole Disney Sony deal with Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. But for this grand finale, however, there is one thing that I want to go and really highlight, and something that I really want to talk about, because this is probably the most sought after, the most overlooked anniversary that's happening this year. And I feel like this is something that really is worth talking about and really worth sharing about this, because without it, then animation would not be where it is today. And it's probably one of the most important cartoon series in animation history. Because what I am talking about here is about the Silly Symphonies. Yes, for the grand finale, I will be honoring this time for the 90th anniversary of the Silly Symphony series. Now, it was on August 22nd, to be precise, where the first Silly Symphony was actually released with the Skeleton Dance. And from there, Silly Symphony has pretty much become a whole cartoon series that consists of 75 different animated shorts that have been distributed by Disney. And as you guys probably know, as I am recording this right now, I am working on Animation Look Back Walt Disney Animation Studios Plus. And right now, I am very familiar with the historical significance with the whole Silly Symphony franchise. Because the big thing about Silly Symphonies and why it is so historically important animation-wise is the fact that this is pretty much a whole experimental ground. For Disney, the purpose of the Silly Symphonies is to test out animation to become really big. Like, the whole point of it is to make sure that animation can really grow to become what it is today, to test out different ways of how animation can work out as a storytelling medium. And from there, it grew into a massive franchise that pretty much spawned off some really important things that are still used to this day by Disney. And on top of that, it even sets a brand new record where it is actually tied with Tom and Jerry as the cartoon series that won the most Oscars at the Academy Awards. And if I can go and list them down for you, let me just see here. And I'm looking at Wikipedia, by the way, with the whole list and the whole history and stuff like that. But the Oscar winners, they would include Flowers and Trees. There is The Three Little Pigs. There is also The Tortoise and the Hare. There is, Who Killed Cock Robin was nominated, but the winner was actually Three Orphan Kittens. Then afterwards, there is The Country Cousin. After that, we also got The Old Mill. And finally, there was The Ugly Duckling. So those 7 major winners out of all the 75 of them. And you might be wondering, how is the Silly Symphony series so important to animation history? How is it that they have built animation to become to this day? Well, there are several factors onto them, and I'm going to list you like the big reasons. Because number one, there is the factor of story. Story is actually very important, because the thing is, they want to try to go and test out animation as a storytelling medium. And this was back in the day that cartoons were only used as a purpose to just dish out just a series of gags, and that's pretty much it. And in terms of Disney, they don't just want to be stuck with just making Mickey Mouse cartoons, even though that's the thing that made them really popular in the first place. So with the purpose of Silly Symphonies, they were able to go and test out many different little stories, rather it be taking fairy tales and and tell them in like a little 7-minute interval, or they would develop their own little stories and try to test that out. And that's why with the Silly Symphony franchise, like, not only would they go and inject some humor, but they also want to test out different moods as well. They want to try to test out the whimsical aspect, that sense of wonder, and maybe try to go and catch different kinds of emotions, not just not just giving people a good laugh, but maybe something scary, maybe something suspenseful, or maybe something sad as well. So that's a big thing about story, and that's why we see a lot of them, and like the factor that they did use a lot of little fairy tales. Sometimes it does actually help out a little bit, and sometimes they would also go and try to put in like little parodies as well. Like, probably the most popular parody that they have is actually one of their last one, Mother Goose Goes Hollywood, and that one is actually noted to be their most expensive Silly Symphony that they have done, which cost about more than $69,000, which would be like millions of dollars in today's money. But with Mother Goose Goes to Hollywood, back then, it actually does really goes to show that pop culture references is actually a timeless practice, where they would take all the biggest stars back in the day, back in the late 30s, and they would go and make little parodies of little fairy tales. And they would have like all the different characters just, play around with the celebrities' personalities in the scenario of the fairy tale. And then, like, following afterwards, of course, they have like different fairy tales. Like, they would have the Ugly Duckling, which, funny enough, they did it twice, that they played the Ugly Duckling. There was one in 1931, and probably their most famous take is actually the Oscar-winning one in 1939, which is also noted to be the last of the Silly Symphony cartoons. And from there, you do see how they would go and play around with stories. So that's the important element on that. And then there is also, of course, the element of animation. Now, animation was a big thing. Of course, like story is one thing, but to test out animation, they want to go and try out many different techniques to see how they can really go and push the medium, like what else they can try to go and do. In fact, the Silly Symphonies, for the most part, it really was a massive testing ground to see what they can and cannot do for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which back then was their most anticipated project ever, and they wanted to see what they can do with the medium in order to get it right for Snow White. And there's a lot of examples for that. Testing out colors, for example. That's what they did with Flowers and Trees, which is actually Disney's first it's actually stated here, the first film to be produced in 3-strip Technicolor. So Flowers and Trees was one of the first ever colored cartoons that you could find. And then there's also, if you guys are probably familiar with animation history and Disney history, then you might be familiar with the multiplane camera, which is actually the technique that they actually use in order to give some of the shots in their animated films a 3D environment. And that was first tested out with the Old Mill, which turned out to be massively successful. And also with the Old Mill, it was the first time that they tried out a serious cartoon, because when you watch the Old Mill, it's not a cartoon that you can go and check out and laugh at the crazy hijinks that are happening. It's very down to earth, it keeps itself very seriously, and they were testing out how to animate animals in a realistic manner, not to go all rubber hose animation. But also, on a side note, I just want to say that not necessarily all the experiments would go and work out. And this is a major case with the Goddess of Spring. Now, the purpose of the Goddess of Spring was to go and test out to see if they can actually go and animate realistic humans. If they can actually go and animate a beautiful girl in a realistic way so that they can also do that for Snow White. And if you've actually seen the cartoon, it's, well, it's not a bad cartoon per se. However, when it comes to their goal to making a realistic, beautiful girl, oh boy, let's just say with the way the Goddess of Spring moved, I wouldn't be, it does look like the Goddess of Spring was olive oil from Popeye. Yeah, it's like you look at that cartoon and it was like they had a long way to go, but thankfully when it was time to actually do Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they actually managed to get the technique right, and they got Snow White to be animated so beautifully as she is right now, on top of like many of the other characters in the films, like the Evil Queen, or when she would turn into the old hag, the huntsman, and the prince and stuff like that. So at least they did get it right. But with the Goddess of Spring, it was something that they showed that, yeah, they still had something that was just like a long way to go. And then there's also another important factor that went into the Silly Symphonies to go and experiment, and that is with the characters. Now, this was also a bit of a testing ground to see how they can go and add in memorable personalities to some of their characters, to have people be invested in the adventure of what's going on, even though they were just introduced to this character in particular. And that is something that they would go and often really test out. And sometimes the test could end up being so successful that the characters have pretty much found new life in themselves. Like a great example is actually with the Tortoise and the Hare. That cartoon ended up becoming so popular, and that was one of the big Oscar winners, that Toby Tortoise and Max Hare, they ended up coming back in a sequel in which it's called Toby Tortoise Returns. And then, of course, another really popular character that they brought out was actually the Three Little Pigs. Now, with the Three Little Pigs, there's like a whole little franchise within the Silly Symphony cartoons, and that's why you would see, like, it's not just the Three Little Pigs they have, but they have also like plenty of other cartoons, like the Big Bad Wolf, or what would be another one? I just want to go and double check. Like, there's also Three Little Wolves, and then like one of the last ones they got is actually the Practical Pig. So there's like a whole franchise with those characters. But then there is one. There is one character, however, that stands out among the rest, and probably is the most popular character that ever came out of the Silly Symphony cartoons that Disney is still using to this day. It was actually in the 1934 cartoon, The Wise Little Hen. And in The Wise Little Hen, it is actually the debut, the introduction to Donald Duck. Yes, Donald Duck actually came from a Silly Symphony cartoon. And in the cartoon, his role was one of the more mischievous characters, where he and another character called Peter Pig, they would go and back away from helping out and doing some work for the Wise Little Hen, where she was just looking for someone to go and help out and try to gather some corn. Like, she would just go around, "Will you help me with my card? Will you help me with my card?" And like and Peter Pig and Donald Duck, they would say, no, I can't do it. Sorry, I got a bellyache. They would go and pull off that little routine. And then at the end, they would have their little comeuppance where instead of getting corn, they ended up with a medicine bottle, and that's pretty much it. But then from there, Donald Duck really became massively popular. There was an overwhelming reception from that Wise Little Hen cartoon that not long afterwards, they decided to bring Donald Duck in a cartoon called Orphan's Benefits, which is a Mickey Mouse cartoon. And from there, Donald Duck's personality really came to life, and that's where we see a lot of his personalities come from that cartoon in particular, where he would be very short-tempered, and you see like his famous fighting stance, or like, he would have some catchphrases like, "Hey, what's the big idea?" and all that kind of stuff. And that's where Donald would really grow into such a massively popular character, where to this day he is still highly beloved. And like, even this year we have celebrated the 85th anniversary of Donald Duck and the Wise Little Hen in general. In fact, June 9th, it was Donald Duck's 85th birthday. So you could tell that this was a place with the Silly Symphonies. It was an area that Disney was really testing out characters to see if they can really pull off having some memorable characters. And sometimes not only do the experiments work, but they can work out much greater than any project that they have done to this day. And then finally, there is another element that they have worked on in order to experiment for their future projects, and that is, of course, with music. Now, of course, nowadays you would think that Disney is pretty synonymous with bringing out some popular music. And Disney right now, they have an entire collection of highly memorable songs coming from their animated features, from their TV shows, from their rides, and of course, from their classic cartoons. And from there, this was all thanks to the experimentations that they have done in Silly Symphonies, where not only were they testing out to see how they can fit music into animation, but also, what I mean is that how they can fit story into animation, but also fit music, how they can make music stand out in the cartoon, not only stand out above the animation, but to have the music to have the story play with the music. And there are plenty of examples of that. And also how they can go and create popular songs out of those little cartoons, and how they can go and fit into the story. And I think the most popular example that I can go and bring up from there is, of course, The Three Little Pigs. The Three Little Pigs is actually the cartoon that houses the most popular the most popular song from the Silly Symphony franchise, of course, but also the first ever popular Disney song in history with Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf. And that song pretty much became a phenomenon. It gained new life in itself. In fact, back then, it was actually used as a tool to be a massive motivator for American audiences in order to get through the Great Depression. So that's why Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf really played a significant role in the popularity of Disney, especially back then, to show that they are capable of not only producing great animations, but also producing great music as well. And from there, that's where it officially began, Disney's entire legacy with music. So, that is pretty much the big thing that we got through all this. That's pretty much the big scenario about Silly Symphonies, and that is why they are so important to animation to this day, because you see that this is the testing ground in order to form what animation can be to this day, and how many of the principles and some of the standard techniques of animation that are still used to this day, they all come from the Silly Symphonies. And even its entire purpose is a tradition that is still used today to create animated shorts in order to experiment to see what new techniques they could find, rather it be through music, through story, through characters, through animation, through all that. It's all to experiment to see how else they can push the limits of making new stories with animation. And this is something that you see companies like DreamWorks, Pixar, and even Disney, they are still doing to this day with some animated shorts. And it's all thanks to Silly Symphonies that they have managed to bring all this to life. And this is why the Silly Symphonies, why I feel like it's one of the most important animated franchises that we've ever had. So honestly, this is all to go and commemorate the 90th anniversary, especially with the Skeleton Dance, which is a great example of how music can, like how animation and story can really, can be pushed aside, where music is like the forefront, how story and animation can follow the music. And this is to say, like a happy 90th anniversary to Silly Symphonies, and why it is one of the most important animated franchises in animation history. It really is an important thing. So yeah, happy 90th anniversary, Silly Symphonies, and hopefully your legacy will stay strong and live on to help make animation stronger. So with that said, I would like to go into the chat wall, and I want to know, what do you guys think about the Silly Symphonies? And share, if you can you share us a little story about like what you guys like about the Silly Symphonies, and what is your favorite Silly Symphony cartoon? I would like to hear it. Okay, let's see now. Let's see. Well, that's interesting that this is Silly Symphony's anniversary and Donald Duck's first appearance. But either happy birthday, Silly Symphonies. But I wonder, Matt, are you going to do a top 10 best Silly Symphonies? And do you think the company could do more? Well, hold on. Let's just wait. Hold on a sec. Like, I mean, I still got plenty on my plate, so hold on a sec before you make any requests. Let's see now. What else do we got here? One of the Silly Symphonies wasn't animated by Disney, as it was by Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, called Merbabies in 1938. They were working on Happy Harmonies for MGM, which was meant to be their version of Disney's Silly Symphonies, which includes Bosco from their Warner tenure, who got a redesign. The series went over budget, and MGM canceled the series and start their own animation studio. A couple of the last Happy Harmonies were supposed to be a part of the Silly Symphonies, by the way. And that is actually an important thing to mention as well, because the Silly Symphonies back then, they were so successful that other studios would go on and create their own version of Silly Symphonies. And there's like so many of them, not just like Happy Harmonies. There's also Swing Symphony, that was from Universal, which is by Walter Lantz. Technically, like one of the most popular copies of Silly Symphonies is technically Merry Melodies, which is Warner Brothers' version of the Silly Symphonies. And then you got like a whole bunch of them, like Color Rhapsodies, Novel Tunes, Rainbow Parade, Color Classics, Cartoon Classics, and all that kind of stuff. Like you got a whole bunch of them. So it does show the popularity of the Silly Symphony franchise back then when you have like a whole bunch of copycats. Let's see now. Silly Symphonies are fun shorts. They are Fantasia with good music and animation. If I choose my favorite, it's definitely The Three Little Pigs. It has become as iconic as Mickey Mouse, and that's a good thing. Which, by the way, what is your favorite Silly Symphony short? Ooh, that is a very good question. I never really thought of that myself, but honestly, if I would have to pick one, I would probably go with the Three Little Pigs cartoons. It was something that I've always grown up with, and I've always enjoyed the Three Little Pigs cartoons. Not just with the first, but also like with the others, like The Big Bad Wolf, The Three Little Wolves, and Practical Pig. Like, I've had a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed those, and they were a lot of fun. So I'd probably say my favorite are with those. Let's see now. Do we have anything else? Okay, I'll just say, I was a huge fan of Silly Symphonies as a kid. I think my most favorite was the Noah's Ark short. I don't know about you, but going to continuously do a skeleton dance and hope it becomes a fad in the 2020s, because it's made in the 1920s, and I heard fads coming in circle in about 100 years. And besides, we're heading back to the 20s, right? Boy, do they not make cartoons like this anymore. Hey, you never know. Like, well, I mean, you could say that there is a bit of a slow comeback of the skeleton dance. Like, maybe not necessarily of the skeleton dance themselves, but I mean, like, especially with the popular fad of, like, the song Spooky Scary Skeletons? Like, everybody's singing, like, Spooky Scary Skeletons. Like, that song. Like, you do often see on videos and stuff like that where people would often recycle using the skeleton dance. So there is, like, a slow comeback that's already happening with it. Let's see now. When I was a kid, I loved watching Silly Symphonies along with the Looney Tunes. There were cartoons that were extremely timeless and really stay up to date and are really funny. My favorite are the Three Little Pigs cartoons, The Wise Little Hen, Elmer Elephant, and more. Okay, that is pretty nice. And I think with that said, that should be all done with this episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. But I know that this is a little bit short, and I know I didn't really talk much, but that is mainly because, well, these little stories that I have here, even with the whole Spider-Man thing, that is nothing compared to the news that we have been gathering this weekend. And as I'm recording this, it is still going on. So I would like to make the major announcement. Tune in on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern on my Twitch channel, as I'm going to put up a special episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, where I'm going to be talking about the big announcements that are happening at this year's D23 Expo, where I'm going to go and talk about the big highlights that has happened with the live action films, the animated films, of course, Disney Plus, and also the theme parks. So once again, it'll be on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it will be up on YouTube on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So with all that said and done, I would like to say thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes!